Most of the time, Earth feels like home. We forget how strange that is. Our bodies only work inside a thin band of temperature, pressure, oxygen, water, and safety. Step outside that band, and the same planet that grows forests and cities can become impossible. There are places where the air can kill you before you understand what is wrong. Places where water falls so relentlessly that stone, metal, and roads begin to feel temporary. Places where the wind is not weather anymore, but a moving wall. And places where humans made the danger ourselves, then drew a line around it and called it forbidden. This is not a travel list. It is a map of Earth's boundaries. Start with the most obvious boundary: heat. Death Valley in California is often treated as the symbol of extreme heat on Earth. Furnace Creek has long been associated with the official world air temperature record, 56.7 degrees Celsius, recorded in July 1913. That record has been debated, and scientists still argue about how reliable the old measurement really was. But the larger truth does not depend on one number. Death Valley is a place where the body loses water faster than instinct expects. Dry heat is deceptive. In humid heat, your sweat cannot evaporate well, so your body cannot cool itself. In a dry desert, sweat disappears almost instantly, which feels more tolerable for a while. But that comfort is a trick. The cooling is paid for with water and the bill comes fast. The danger is not that the desert hates you. The danger is that it does not notice you. Heat is visible, poisonous air is not. On Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula, inside the Kronotsky Nature Reserve, there is a place known as the Valley of Death. It sits near volcanic terrain, where gases such as hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide can collect close to the ground. That detail matters. Some gases are heavier than normal air. In a low valley, especially when the wind is weak, they can settle like an invisible lake. Birds, rodents, foxes, bears, and other animals may enter the basin and never leave. From above, it can still look like a landscape. From inside, it is a trap with no walls. This is one of the most unsettling kinds of danger because our senses are late. By the time the body understands that the air is wrong, the body may already be failing. At the opposite edge is Oymyakon, in eastern Siberia, often described as one of the coldest permanently inhabited places on Earth. Winter temperatures there can fall so low that ordinary objects become unreliable. Batteries die, ink thickens, metal becomes painful to touch. Vehicles may be kept running because once an engine gets too cold, starting it again becomes a problem. Cold is not simply the absence of heat. It changes the behavior of materials. Rubber hardens, fuel thickens, skin loses sensation. The small technologies that make modern life feel normal begin to negotiate with physics. And yet people live there. That is the strange part. Oymyakon is not forbidden because nobody can survive it. It is frightening because survival there requires constant agreement with the cold. The environment does not forgive casual mistakes. Then there is the danger of too much water. Cherrapunji, also called Sora, in Meghalaya, India, holds legendary rainfall records. Guinness lists 300 millimeters of rain there in July 1861, and more than 26 meters over a 12-month period from 1860 to 1861. Those numbers are hard to feel. So imagine a month where the sky drops a column of water taller than a two-story building. Not as a flood that arrives once, but as a condition of life. Rain turns paths into rivers, it rots wood, it tests stone, it makes bridges temporary. And yet the people there built one of the most beautiful answers to the problem: living root bridges. Instead of fighting the wet climate with dead material, they trained living roots across rivers. The bridge grows stronger because it is alive. In this chapter, The forbidden place is not only danger, it is also adaptation. Wind is easy to underestimate because we think of it as empty, but air has mass. Move enough of it fast enough and it stops feeling empty. Mount Washington in New Hampshire recorded a 372 km/h wind gust in 1934, a record later exceeded by a 408 km/h gust on Barrow Island in Australia during a tropical cyclone. One was a mountain famous for brutal weather. The other was a short, violent burst from a storm system. At those speeds, wind is not background. It is a force that can erase balance, strip heat from skin, and turn small objects into weapons. It makes a modest mountain feel like a high-altitude expedition. It makes walking an engineering problem. Weather is what happens above us. Extreme weather is what happens to us. Some forbidden places were not made by climate. They were made by decisions. Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands looks like the image of paradise from above. Blue Lagoon, coral ring, clean geometry in the Pacific. But after World War II, it became one of the symbols of the nuclear age. UNESCO records that 67 nuclear tests were carried out in the area from 1946 to 1958, after local inhabitants were displaced. That contrast is what makes Bikini so powerful. The danger is not visible in the color of the water. Radiation does not need ruins to be real. A place can be beautiful and contaminated at the same time. It asks a question that is larger than one island. How long does a human decision remain in the land after the humans leave? Gruinard Island, off the coast of Scotland, tells a smaller but equally disturbing version of the same story. During World War II, Britain used the island to test anthrax as a biological weapon. The test ended. The war ended. But the soil did not simply return to normal because the calendar moved on. For decades, the island carried a reputation as a contaminated place. Decontamination efforts in the 1980s eventually made it possible to declare the island safe again. But the story remains unsettling because it shows a different kind of forbidden zone. Not heat, not cold, not a storm. A living organism, or the trace of one, can make a landscape suspicious. Biology is usually what makes Earth habitable. Here, biology became the boundary. Poveglia in the Venetian Lagoon belongs to a different category. Its danger is partly historical, partly psychological, and partly myth. For centuries, Venice lived with the fear of plague, and quarantine islands became part of how the city tried to control disease. Poveglia is often described through stories of isolation, illness, abandonment, and later hospital use. Over time, those facts gathered legends around them. This is where we have to be careful. The ghost stories are not the evidence. They are the afterimage. The real story is already dark enough. A society trying to protect itself by moving the sick to the edge of the map. A city drawing a line between the living and the possibly infected. Sometimes a forbidden place is not dangerous because of what is still there. It is dangerous because of what people remember. And then there are places that are forbidden not because nature says no, but because power says no. Area 51 is the most famous example. For decades, it existed in public imagination as a blank spot in the Nevada desert. In 2013, declassified CIA history connected the site to secret aircraft programs such as the U-2 and Oxguard. That official history is less alien than the myths, but in some ways more interesting. A forbidden place does not need monsters to become magnetic. It only needs a fence, silence, and enough empty desert for imagination to grow. Area 51 shows that secrecy is its own geography. Once a state draws a boundary around knowledge, the boundary itself becomes a story. The public fills the silence with theories. The silence becomes part of the site. Put all of these places together, and the pattern becomes clear. A forbidden place is not always a cursed place. Sometimes it is too hot, sometimes too cold, sometimes too wet, too windy, too radioactive, too contaminated, too remembered, or too classified. What changes is the mechanism. What stays the same is the warning. Human life is narrow. Civilization makes that narrow range feel large. We build walls, pipes, engines, hospitals, satellites, maps, and laws. We make little bubbles where the body can pretend the universe is friendly. But at the edges, the illusion weakens. Earth is not one environment. It is many environments, and only some of them are ours. The forbidden places remind us that the planet is not hostile. It is simply bigger than us.